And now for something completely different. This is one I think a lot of you will enjoy. Obviously, it's cool to see wacky stuff on this channel, and I love experimenting with wacky things. And when I saw this posted on Sloppy, I was like, if you need tuning services, please contact me because I just want to mess with this. So thank you. So this is Calvin's. I believe this is a 63 or a 62. They gave me both info because it's one body but titled as another. Anyway, that's not terribly important. The motor swap is the coolest thing, obviously. The car itself is really neat looking in my opinion. It has a lot of people might not know what they're looking at, an Atlas 4.2 liter, or also known as the Vortec 4200, also known as the Trailblazer inline 6 engine. So that's what's installed. And then this car has like fairly normal stuff from their back. It has a TH400 that they did a little bit of machining, drilling, and whatever, and spacing to fit the stock flex plate to a TH400 converter. And it has, I'm unsure what drive shaft. I don't think I even asked, but it has a 10 bolt, 8.5 10 bolt rear end. I think he said out of an S10. So this thing, he built a intake manifold and he built his own exhaust manifold, as you can see, for the turbo. And he says the turbo is a Garrett based, like a 66 or 67 exhaust side, something like that. He wasn't exactly sure, and I mean, we're close enough on that, so it doesn't really matter. It is blowing into a 3-inch air-to-air intercooler into his custom intake manifold. And I could notice that it was like a Ford style throttle body right away because of just the way the throttle position sensor and the pulse width modulated 2-wire idle air control motor. So it has like a 60 millimeter Ford throttle body, I think he said on there. He did all of the wiring himself. He installed the engine and everything himself and did an excellent job. The car is running on a micro squirt. So even like the bottom barrel mega squirt stuff, he said, I asked him a bunch of questions like about the trigger and stuff like that, the trigger wheel for the ignition. And he said the early one is like a 7-to-1 wheel, which is hard to get it to run right, but it was very easy to retrofit the more modern Atlas 4200 crank trigger, which is a 58X, which obviously is way easier to use. I progressed on and we learned a lot about the car. I will share a bunch of it with you as we run the car in the background here. One interesting thing was when he brought the car, it was boost creeping fairly badly, which is partially due to, slightly crappy wastegate placement, which he might change or do a larger wastegate at this point. But one of the other things we learned was the engine was seemingly significantly under-timed. I've never tuned one of these, so it was an experience for both of us. He's mixing about E50 because we were running out of injector and everything else, so we were trying to find a good balance of octane and horsepower. So as we turned it up, we mixed the fuel up and down. Also, as I added ignition and we gained power, the power stayed the same on a bunch of pulls in the middle, but boost kept going down. And this is also because an effect you'll see on like an anti-lag when your ignition is retarded, it lights the exhaust side, well, it lights the cylinder off while the exhaust valve is opening at some point, and you get a whole bunch of unburnt going into your exhaust, acting as a catalyst to spin off your turbo. And I've seen it happen before where you run into, like, I did it on my truck where I used traction control that pulled timing, and when it would pull a significant amount of timing, my boost would run away. And something similar to that, making a pull here, you can hear it's very lazy on the first couple dyno pulls if you rewind, and later on it really woke up. And part of the reason was putting significant amount of timing into it, or from where we started. I started with like pump gas LS ignition amounts, and then we progressed from there. I put like 10 or 12 in on top of that, and it really started to wake up. So boost went down to about 10 pounds. And after that, he has a electronic boost controller hooked up to the ECU. I was able to add boost back on top, and there's a significant difference from when it came in to having a little bit of boost on top of the gate and how much power it makes earlier. Like, makes power way earlier, engine wakes up way faster. If anything, the gearing is a little bit short and the converter might be a tiny bit loose, but he plans to drag race the car and have some fun with it. So I'm like, well, loose is better than too tight. At least you can try 60 foot in the thing. And the people are very tight-lipped about these engines. Not a lot of people are doing it. Not a lot of people are sharing information. And there could be some stuff that just is a little bit off as far as information till everybody learns, because if you guys look back hard enough, the LS engine was made of glass. So we all know that that is not the truth anymore. So I will continue on with some informational jabbering here real quick about this thing, because I know a lot of people, like this thing a lot. I thought it was really interesting. I thought I would be one of the first people to install this in something. I asked my buddy Mike at EFI Source years ago if he would be interested in partnering with, setting up an ECU and bass tune on something like this, and just never did it. Kept messing with the LS. Look where I'm at, envious of this thing. Anyway, there is a large write-up about this on the Sloppy Public page. A man named Jake Ingalls posted about. He brought up a ton of pertinent, relevant pros and cons about this entire engine and why people use it and why people don't use it. And as we go over it here, the transmission stuff certainly isn't as easy as an LS. We go over a lot of stuff here where I think they changed the firing order of this engine, so they changed the crank, and the crank is not square, so it's not balanced inherently, so it has a little bit of vibration and harmonics issues at like 6,500 RPM. Most people say don't go over 6,000, and what it does is it eventually beats its own bearings out of itself and just has other crappy issues. There are people with this engine going extremely fast, but they have tons and tons of money into custom things if you look into it. The other thing is, from what I read also, people say the block is not that rigid, so that's a whole other strength thing, and the oil pan is part of the block's rigidity and strength, so changing the oil pan significantly takes away strength from the block. Also, the other kind of crappy thing is it's a VVT engine, and controlling that sometimes can be a little bit of an issue. That scares people. The plastic intake manifold stock stretches over The coil pack's making it kind of a pain in the ass on a tall engine. It's also very long. So, you know, in some cars it would probably fit great. In other things, not that great. The whole other unknowns are just the engine management and information is just not there. People are scared to put an LS engine in, and that's kind of funny because there's 40 standalones options for everything, you know, turnkey solutions, and people are still afraid. So that's one of the reasons why people stray away from this. I could show you guys some data logs and some dyno pulls real quick if you still want to hang in there. I figure I'll make the video long enough, and if people watch, they watch. If you don't, I try to get the fascinating stuff out of the way first. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's go over some data logs quick and how they came out on the other side. So this was the first hit as he brought it, and we softened up the ignition a little bit. And this is the pull where you can see significant creep going on. I think he said he bench tested a 3-pound spring, and that's what's in it. No. Stupid update thing. So when I slugged it, the first thing I noticed was it went pretty fat, which data log, he set this up so it's perfect. So I slug it here around 2,900. I go in on it, and it's at 2 pounds, and then you'll notice it slowly, the red line is boost. It slowly makes boost up to limiter at 5,800. So also what you'll see is air fuel is tanked the whole time on low boost. This car is running on E50, so it's not even aggressive. You can run I like to run a mid 12 air fuel, low 12 till like 7 pounds, and then 1170. Up to like 20 pounds, above 20 pounds, maybe 1130. It makes really good power, seems very safe. Cameron Power's stock bottom end 4,000 pound Crown Vic is running pretty much the same fueling, so should be no problem for a 400 horsepower 4-liter. Anyway, as we get back to this, we can see here, you know, it starts low and it creeps and creeps and creeps and creeps, and then eventually we get to 16.5 pounds, so it was just on its way up. And it almost hit 17, and here we can see it has about 13 degrees of timing in it. It has about 20, 22 on motor on the hit, and then it blends in and out. So what you'll see is, as I go through here and I trim out the fuel, this one was a shy bit lean, but it's E and it's short pulls, so I just stayed in it to figure out the amount I needed. So she go a little bit lean on low boost, wasn't sweating it. And then as we came up top, it was like a 12.0, not that bad. On, where are we making boost here? 12 pounds. No, 14 pounds, I'm sorry. Yeah, so as we clean this up, we noticed I started to clean up the fuel and we added ignition, and what was happening was boost was getting lower. Obviously, the engine was really liking this dip I was kicking out of it. It was hitting this 13.0. It was coming up sooner. Again, if you go back in the video, the first hit, it's very lazy to come up. And then as I keep hitting it, it just keeps getting nicer and nicer. So here, like a 12.5, slowly transitions out to an 11.7, closing in on 13 pounds. So boost kept lowering as we were adding ignition in. And you can see here we have spark advance 19 degrees here, and it was really making good power, and the boost was lower. And as let me go jump to a middle one. It stopped out around no, I wish you could turn that off. I really hate that. As we got about 21, 22 degrees in it, the wastegate situation wasn't looking as bad, because I think because it was slightly under timed, and that just happens. So here, this is almost perfectly trimmed out here. Obviously, I was getting a little aggressive with it, but it's E. So I got it smoothed out nice and neat at the end. I'll show you. We still had a little dip on the hit. We got rid of that. Got a 13.0, 13.30 here at 6 pounds. We're breaking into the 12s. And then 11 pounds, we're at 11.7. So that, you can see that reflects here on the first hit. You can see, yeah, okay, great. This is cleaning up fuel, and boost is going down, mind you. And I'm adding a little bit of spark as we clean up fuel, and power's going up. fuel usage is going down and boost is going down. So we're making more horsepower on less boost. So a funny thing was happening here, right? And then we noticed boost was falling off. And I'm like, I'm adding ignition, and I'm like, oh, well, that ignition wasn't worth it. It made the same power. Well, not entirely, because I added a degree, we lost a pound of boost and made the same power. And like this just kept happening until, like I said, obviously he needs a little bit of wastegate work, but we saw something interesting going on there. And then once we got the boost low enough, because he had the boost controller wired, which we laughed at because it had such a runaway situation that we were like, dude, we're never going to use this boost controller because your stuff's hitting 16, 18 pounds accidentally. So after it started to level itself off, we could implement the boost control, which does an amazing thing a lot of you are familiar with. It'll bring the turbo in sooner. It cuts off, it pushes back down. It forces the turbo to hit a higher speed, and so you get better bottom end. A lot of factory turbocharged cars like Subarus and everything have a wastegate actuator, a little electronic boost controller. And you can see I start to implement it here, so boost is coming in way sooner. So if we look at like how it came in, a little bit lazy on fuel, and then we look at like here, it's incredible, really. You can see how much earlier it's getting on that torque and boost hump. It's really killing it down low, and it just comes up to a tension extremely fast. So what I'll do is I'll show you that last log or two, and I'll show you what the air fuel line and the boost line look like. Nice and clean is what you'll see. So you can see right here, I stab it and bam, air fuel. This is a little bit of enrichment. It's always going to do this. You kind of want it to. This is another thing that like you'll learn if you mess with enough of these. Sometimes an absolutely perfect air fuel line doesn't feel great. So sometimes the car wants a little bit of a rich dip to have good response on the pedal. Anyway, 1170 as it gets into the meat here. 12.7 on 7 pounds, 12.3 on 10, 12.0, 11.5, and then it rides out fairly, like if we look here, average air fuel 11.6 from this span here. But what you see here is it comes up on boost and levels off on boost much nicer. It has a nice 11.7, have your cake and eat it too, E80, E50 air fuel. So what do we see here? Boost average 15.9. Spark advance around 20 degrees the whole time. I just bring it up as RPM comes up, but you can't really swing these motors, so it didn't really gain much. Also, the converter comes up nice and hard now. It's like boom, because it's making good power on motor. It swings the converter up. So, I hope you guys can learn a lot from that. Where are we at on boost controller duty cycle? 52%. So at this point, he was pretty much out of fuel, and he was done slugging it for now. He plans to make a little bit of changes or race it as is. You know how it is. It's his thing. He can do what he wants. But this is the the neat thing about having a dyno and seeing what all those changes produce. So I'm definitely curious to see more out of this engine. It's one of those things that I think is really cool, and I hope he continues to push it and doesn't have too much terrible luck to the point of where he hates it. We may be helping him out with a little bit of an ECU upgrade, which I would love to see him enable the VVT and use the VVT to his advantage to spool or retard or advance the cam would be really awesome. So hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions, let me know. It's a really awesome project. So thanks, enjoy, have a good one. I'll put links to his Grassroots Motorsports thread down below. Thanks, bye.